Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about updates to 3 of my older builds. I'll feature 3 builds here. 2 of them are league starters, and 1 you should definitely not league start, which is the Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice that a lot of people liked last league, me included. And the 2 league starters I'll feature are the EA Ballista and the Power Siphon of Archmage Ballista. First up, people are saying that I prefer Ballista builds for some reason. That is absolute slander, and it's a complete coincidence. I just wanted to point that out. But with that out of the way, let's start with EA Ballista. They got severely nerfed. We got 50% reduced golem effect. Now, a lot of people don't know the role of golems. Whenever they hear a archetype, they're like, oh, everything revolves around golems, right? I'll quickly show you what this 50% reduced effect of golems actually does in like mid-game, right? That's what this does. And what they try to combat here is mostly just the ridiculous power spikes that golems give you. And come endgame, golems are nothing more than a little bit of an afterthought, right? You can obviously, there's other builds where you scale them like crazy, but this build, it is just a huge power spike for early to mid game. So for some people, this looks drastic, but I can guarantee you it is not going to feel any different at most stages in the game. You might feel it a little bit around about level 34 when you first pick up your golems, but it is a drop in the bucket. Second thing is rune grafts. Well, rune grafts are completely separate from your scaling, so telling you to go for like a fire-based one is complete bait. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that really scales it is minus to elemental resistances, so if you have a fire one, you already have flammability and stuff like that. Okay, that is synergistic, but whatever is good, really. Keep an open mind here. It might be a buff, it might be a damage dealer, maybe like a little bit of burst, or maybe a help for clear. Whatever you need it to do. Also, do remember that this build didn't lose all that much from mercs. Mercs are gone now, and so is the HP that the mercs give you because you're in a party. So yeah, I don't think you're gonna feel much. Other builds that abused the merc a lot more will feel the hurt definitely more. As for bloodline ascendancies, the only thing I was interested in was schizophrenic dissociation, which makes it so you're a lot tankier. And for most dot builds, jewels are not as important as, for example, for crit builds, because crit multi is so premium on them. But now that we know that you can actually have 0, that's a thing. But I can see it maybe in endgame, because if you use clusters and then you have megalomaniacs everywhere and you go full golem effect, right, with primordial bond, that could be a thing. So maybe look out for that if you want to push the game into endgame. But otherwise, fact of the matter is, you have 4 very good ascendancies to click, and a lot of these bloodline ascendancies are more there to fill in the gaps for some of the weaker ones. I'll link the POV down below in the description, but I can straight up tell you all I did is put this here. So if you're already familiar with the build, you don't really need to consider all that much. Look out for rune grafts. This goes for every build, but some of them might be completely broken, especially after watching the Ziggy D video. Then let's talk Power Siphon of Archmage Ballistas. This one I was testing for 3.26, and I was extremely hyped for it. I was gonna league start it, and then the patch came around and they nerfed it by around about 25%. So it got 25% less damage, and honestly, I could have still league started it, but then I also saw the golem buffs, and I just ended up playing EA Ballista. The build is still very solid, and it's extremely good at stuff like legions. It has a really good clear speed, especially if you can get your hands on the Fury Valve early, but there are quite a few question marks, as with a lot of other wand builds. That being said, I'm most likely going to start something different. I'm going to try out some of the new wand skills, but this is a very safe, I would say, safe setup if you like totem playstyle to fall back on if all those other things are bad. Like, for example, if Wall of Force sucks, if for some reason they pre-nerf Kinetic Rain, if Kinetic Rain of Impact sucks, Kinetic Blast of Clustering doesn't deliver the single target damage we need, right? This is still there. Now, this is a wand build, so a lot of new stuff has happened. There's a lot of question marks. Power Siphon of Archmage, I'm actually surprised it did not receive any buffs pinpointed to it. So I will definitely be playing with some of the new tools that we have, but this is a good fallback plan if everything fails. There's a lot of question mark because it's a wand build right now. There's definitely more exciting things, like, for example, Kinetic Rain, right? KBF clustering, maybe. If you like the totem playstyle, this one is very cozy and will carry you for quite a while. It is definitely not as good early game as EA Ballista, though. That is for sure, especially in the single target department. But the clear speed is like double. And one of the biggest things for this build, as is the case for KBF clustering, is will the rune graft of recompense work? Because technically, you only do fire 1 projectile at every enemy. So the wording is quite weird with Power 7 of the Archmage. So this could actually work to give you +1 chain and fork for free. And the way these builds usually operate is with Fury Valve in endgame, which you might say, well, I can just go Fury Valve, right? And that's true, but losing an ME slot in endgame is ridiculous. That is a huge opportunity cost, especially on a mana stacker. So if we could alleviate that and you wouldn't have to buy the Fury Valve, then that would be big. With that said though, I haven't played this build ever since it got nerfed. I've heard people have good results with it, and it will be my fallback plan if things go sour. It does have decent damage. It's kind of squishy-ish, as a lot of these Wander builds will be, but in total, solid package. There is a good chance I will have an updated POB for this, and I will link it down below in the description in my doc that I will be making for some of the pops. But in general, I'll link down to the video that I made back then. Now, let's talk Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice here at the end. First up, don't league start this build. I don't think I have to say this, but I'll just point it out right now. This is if you played this build last league and you want to maybe play it again. I'll leave the link down below in the description. And this is only for my version. There's a lot of different ones running out there. So the biggest thing that happened is that Coiling Whispers got indirectly nerfed. The reason for that is that you now can't really use Hex Touch support as well as it used to. This used to have 50% reduced duration, which was additive, which is actually a good thing for reduced duration. So your Bladefall setup will now be a lot less consistent. That is what that means, TLDR. So yeah, you will need to stack more reduced duration. Whereas before it was consistent without this Impossible Escape, you will now need a Impossible Escape with Magebane. Now there are setups out there that are probably going to be fine. There's Azanough setups, sure. And in theory, all you need to hit is the, the 0.7 second skill effect duration, but from personal experience, I can tell you this is going to feel a lot less consistent, even with this. The difference is quite staggering. Now, I have in this POB removed the Hex Touch support and put in 35% less duration. Now, also, I have to remove the Merc buffs, actually. Also, the build loses round about, I don't know, 10% damage from Whispers of Infinity getting nerfed. So I put 100 max ES here, which is now the new amulet. It used to be 480 with the quality, so that's also a pretty big deal for a build that scales off of ES. One thing I want to note though is a lot of people criticized my use of the gloves last patch. As I said in the video though, this was just a personal thing. I really didn't like how the skill feels without a ton of projectile speed, and I still stand by that. This patch, you might want to look into it even if you don't like it though, because if you don't have a 6-link setup, you're not going to be able to use stuff like the Swift Affliction. And I can also tell you from personal experience that if you have a Lightning Warp in this setup, you are not just reliant on Bladefall of Chargers, you're also going to Lightning Warp and apply the debuff to enemies and then get Soul Eater stacks as well. So if you want to play this build again and you were like anti-gloves last patch, highly recommend to give it another shot this time around. Overall though, the build was quite OP. It lost around about 20% of its damage. It will probably feel a little bit more clunky. You might now be locked into having to use a 6-link setup. Not necessarily. I'm sure there's going to be other people who can figure stuff out. One thing I want to mention is that cast on crit setups are more interesting now, right? So we're talking about Coiling Whispers and all the things you have to do to make it work to get that 225% cast speed. And it is worth, just for the playstyle alone, it just feels good. But if you're cast on crit, you don't need cast speed. You can circumvent that. And the reason I didn't play cast on crit last patch, and why I think it was inferior on the same amount of gear, was because it couldn't make use of this ring. The ring was one of the reasons I went self-cast. And for some reason, GGG just doesn't like you to self-cast, even though they claim they do. So it might be the case that we're just back to cast on crit, straight up. Just think about the hoops we have to go through, the amount of points, the jewel sacrificed here that we have to do just in order to get this cast speed this patch. We also sacrifice a ring slot, which is a big deal, especially if you go power charge stacker later. At what point do you just say, screw it, and you just go cast on crit? There is also a time clasp setup, but I would personally not recommend that. So if you don't know, time clasp also has reduced duration. And this one makes it so you might not need this Magebane setup, right? The Impossible Escape, because that one might be really expensive. There's quite a few builds that want this for either increased or reduced duration access. Straight up, it does a lot less damage, and I don't think this build is all that great on a budget now. On top of that, the Immortal Call setup is now basically just a meme because we have to scale even more global duration. One of the good things about getting all of the duration fixed with just the Hex Touch support is that it's local, right? You don't have to scale all the global reduced duration and make all your other skills worse, but now we do. And now the uptime on Immortal Call is a joke, so you might as well remove it, which might also be a little bit of an issue. With that said though, do I think this build is unplayable? Not even close. It might move from an S tier to an A tier build, or there's going to be new versions that address all of this. There's going to be versions that just don't use the ring at all. Honestly, I can totally see that. So experiment around if you love the skill. I'm most likely going to play new stuff, so it's very unlikely that I'm going to touch this unless I have an idea. But yeah, that's the update. As for Bloodline Ascendancies, Bitter Heresy might be quite interesting if you can get it into the build. Maybe with stuff like a Zealotry, or if that's not enough, maybe a Rational Doctrine. Otherwise, a lot of these are still up in the air, but yeah. Experiment around. But yeah, either way, I will be starting some new stuff. I will be playing around with Wander skills. I'm a little bit afraid of people who don't really know what they're getting into. Wands are getting ultra hyped right now. People don't really know the downsides of League starting a Wander, and a lot of the things are question marks right now. So I'm going to address that in the coming videos as well. But yeah, I just want to play with the new tools. That's round about it. So I will be putting out a video on what I'm planning soon. And yeah, if you're playing any of the builds mentioned in this video, hope you enjoy the League. If there is new tech, then you will probably have to be on your own, because I'm not going to follow the builds. I'm not going to play the builds mentioned in this video, just to be clear. So I will not be having update videos, but you obviously can access from whenever I played it in the past. And yeah, with that being said, this is still another slogan. See you next time.